The stolen life. It's amazing how the person you'd take a bullet for ends up being the one behind the trigger. I watched as my sister Michelle walked down the aisle in my wedding dress, with my fiancé waiting at the altar, surrounded by my friends, living my life. The worst part? I was expected to stand there smiling, playing the role of the supportive maid of honor, while everything I'd ever wanted was being handed to her on a silver platter. Again, let me rewind to where this nightmare began. I'm Kate, 32, an event planner in Seattle who's spent her entire life in the shadow of a sister who could do no wrong. Michelle was younger by just 18 months, but you'd think she was crafted by the gods themselves the way our parents treated her. While I was the responsible one, Michelle was the special one. I learned to live with it. What choice did I have? When I met Ryan 3 years ago at a coffee shop downtown, it felt like the universe was finally cutting me a break. He was handsome, successful at his architecture firm, and most importantly, he saw me. Not as someone's sister or daughter, but as Kate. Our connection was instant, and for once in my life, I had something that was wholly mine, untouched by Michelle's influence. You're different, Ryan told me on our third date as we walked along the waterfront, the Seattle skyline glittering behind us. You don't try so hard. You're just real. I almost laughed at the irony. I'd spent my entire life trying desperately to be seen, and he thought I wasn't trying at all. But I understood what he meant. With him, I didn't have to compete. I could just exist. When Ryan proposed after 18 months, I was ecstatic. My parents were predictably subdued in their enthusiasm. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear," my mother said, before immediately asking, "Have you told Michelle?" Michelle had been living in Boston for the past few years, pursuing her acting career, or rather, waiting tables while occasionally landing small roles in local theater productions. We spoke maybe once a month, obligatory calls full of her dramatic stories and vague interest in my life. When I told her about the engagement, her reaction was oddly muted. "Wow, that's great, sis. I'm happy for you," she said, though her voice carried none of the warmth those words should contain. "I've actually been thinking about moving back to Seattle. The scene here isn't working out." 3 weeks later, she was back, sleeping in our parents' guest room and figuring things out. I should have seen the warning signs when she immediately wanted to meet Ryan, to give him the sister seal of approval, she'd said with that laugh that always made people lean in closer. Ryan, being the genuinely good person he was, welcomed her with open arms. "Family is everything," he told me. "I'm glad she's back in your life." Planning the wedding should have been the happiest time of my life. As an event planner, I had connections with every vendor in the city and a clear vision of what I wanted: a waterfront ceremony at sunset, with the Olympic mountains in the background. Simple, elegant, and intimate, Michelle immediately inserted herself into every decision. "As the maid of honor, it's my duty," she'd say, showing up uninvited to vendor meetings. She'd contradict my choices, suggesting bolder colors or more elaborate decorations. "Kate's always been so safe," she'd explain to the florist or the caterer, with a theatrical sigh. "Let's help her step outside her comfort zone." Ryan thought it was sweet how involved she was. "She just wants your day to be perfect," he said when I expressed frustration. "And she does have great taste." The cracks started to show about 4 months before the wedding. Ryan and I had dinner plans, but he canceled last minute. "Something came up at work," he texted. "Rain check?" Later that night, while scrolling through Instagram, I saw Michelle's post: a dimly lit bar, 2 cocktails, and a caption: "Sometimes you just need to talk things out with someone who gets it." #blessed #new friendship. The corner of Ryan's watch was visible in the edge of the frame. Confronted her the next day. She laughed it off. "Oh my God, are you serious? Ryan needed advice about your wedding gift, and I was helping him. It was supposed to be a surprise." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the secret meetings continued. I'd catch glimpses of texts on Ryan's phone, "Same time," or "Can't wait to see you." When questioned, the explanations grew increasingly elaborate. They were planning a surprise honeymoon. They were organizing a special dance for the reception. You're being paranoid, my mother said when I shared my concerns. Michelle would never do that to you. She loves you. Besides, what would Ryan see in her that he doesn't see in you? There it was, the question that had haunted me my entire life. What did Michelle have that I didn't? The answer, according to everyone from my parents to my grade school teachers to my college boyfriends, was everything. The wedding was 6 weeks away when I decided to follow Ryan after work. He told me he had a late meeting, but his assistant, whom I'd befriended while planning a corporate event, mentioned he'd cleared his evening schedule, tracked his car to a viewpoint overlooking the city, the very spot where he'd proposed to me. And there they were, sitting on a bench, Michelle's head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The intimate posture of lovers sharing secrets. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't process what I was seeing. I drove home in a daze, my vision blurred with tears, and waited for Ryan to return. Where were you? I asked when he finally came home at 11 p.m. Working late, he said, not meeting my eyes. Big project deadline. Stop lying to me. I screamed, the months of suspicion and betrayal erupting like a volcano. I saw you with her. The fight that followed was ugly. Ryan admitted they'd grown close, we just connect, Kate, but swore nothing physical had happened. It's emotional, not physical, he said, as if that made it better. Do you love her? I asked, my voice hollow. His hesitation was answer enough. I packed a bag and went to my friend Amber's apartment. I couldn't face my parents, they'd find a way to make this my fault. Somehow, I wasn't enough. Again, the next morning, my phone exploded with messages. From Ryan, begging me to come home so we could work through this. From my mother, demanding to know why I was creating drama so close to the wedding. And from Michelle, a single text that read, I'm sorry you found out this way. But maybe it's for the best. Ryan and I never meant to hurt you. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called my boss and took 2 weeks of emergency leave. I needed space to think, to breathe, to decide what my life would look like now that the future I'd planned had been stolen from me. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had dozens of missed calls and a voicemail from my mother that changed everything. Catherine, this behavior is unacceptable. Running away doesn't solve anything. Ryan and Michelle are beside themselves with worry. They've been trying to find a solution that works for everyone. The venue is booked, the deposits are paid. Michelle has offered to step in. She and Ryan think it might be best if they go through with the wedding. They didn't want to tell you this way, but you've left them no choice. Call me back immediately. I played the message 3 times, each replay making it more surreal. They were going to take my wedding. Not just my fiancé, not just my happiness, but the entire event I'd spent a year planning. They were going to stand in the spot I'd chosen, eat the food I'd selected, dance to the music I'd curated, and act like it was always meant to be theirs, and my parents were supporting this. Something inside me snapped. The Kate who had always accepted being second best, who had swallowed her resentment and smiled through the injustice, she disappeared. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, a woman who refused to be erased from her own life. I called my mother back. I'm coming to the wedding, I said, my voice eerily calm. Oh, thank goodness, she sighed with relief. Michelle was hoping you'd agree to be her maid of honor. It would mean so much to her. The audacity stole my breath. Of course, I heard myself say. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The 6 weeks that followed were a masterclass in deception, not mine, but theirs. They rewrote our history in real time. Ryan and Michelle now claimed they'd always had a special connection but had fought it because of me. My parents nodded along, probably relieved their golden child had secured the successful architect instead of the daughter they'd always seen as second-rate. The wedding preparations continued as if nothing had changed, except now Michelle was the bride. She even kept most of my choices, the venue, the flowers, the menu, but took credit for them. I've always had a vision for my perfect day, she told anyone who would listen. I played my part perfectly. The supportive sister, helping with last-minute details, smiling through dress fittings. She took my custom gown to be altered for her, of course, offering opinions on hairstyles and makeup. Everyone remarked on how mature I was being, how generous it was to support my sister's happiness, and no one asked if I was okay. No one wondered what it felt like to watch someone else step into the life you'd built. They were too busy marveling at Michelle's good fortune and Ryan's unwavering devotion to her. The night before the wedding, we had the rehearsal dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. I sat at the head table, next to Michelle, as guest after guest toasted to the happy couple. Some awkwardly avoided mentioning the last-minute bride swap. Others pretended I'd never been in the picture at all. Michelle leaned over during dessert, her voice low. "I know this must be hard for you," she said, squeezing my hand with practiced sympathy. "But you'll find someone too, someday. Someone who's right for you in a way Ryan was right for me." I looked into her eyes, the same shape and color as mine, but somehow always reflecting more light, demanding more attention, and smiled. "I'm just glad you're happy." The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the September sun casting a golden glow over the water. I helped Michelle get ready, zipping her into my wedding dress, arranging the veil I'd selected months ago. She looked beautiful, as she always did, but there was something new in her expression, a smugness, a certainty that she had won the game we'd been playing our entire lives. "You know," she said as I adjusted her train, "Ryan told me he always felt something special when we were together, even when he was with you. Like he knew I was the one, but he just wasn't ready to admit it to himself." I froze, my hands still clutching the delicate fabric. "Is that right?" She nodded, checking her reflection. "He said being with you was easy and comfortable, but with me, it's passionate and real." She turned to face me, her expression softening into mock concern. "I probably shouldn't tell you this today of all days, but I thought it might help you move on. To know it was always going to end up this way." The ceremony was set to begin in an hour. Guests were arriving, taking their seats overlooking the water. My parents were greeting people, beaming with pride. Ryan was somewhere with his groomsmen, preparing to publicly declare his love for the woman who had always taken what was mine, and I stood in the bridal suite, looking at my sister, really looking at her, perhaps for the first time. I saw not just her beauty or her charm, but the emptiness beneath it. The desperate need to be chosen, to be best, to win at any cost. I saw her fear that without these victories, these stolen trophies, she might disappear entirely, and I pitied her. "Michelle," I said gently, "can I show you something before we go out there?" Curious, she followed me to my bag, from which I pulled out a folder. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside were printouts of text messages, emails, and photos, dozens of them, documenting Ryan's infidelity over the past 2 years. Not just with Michelle, but with 3 other women. Screenshots of dating apps he'd been active on throughout our relationship. Hotel receipts. Late-night texts. What is this?" Michelle's voice trembled as she flipped through the evidence. "Ryan isn't the prize you think he is," I said quietly. "He's been cheating on me since 6 months into our relationship. And he'll cheat on you too." Her face drained of color. "You're lying. You're just trying to ruin this for me." I shook my head. "I found out 3 months ago. I hired a private investigator after I started suspecting something was off. I was going to confront him after the honeymoon, try to work through it in therapy." I took a deep breath. "Then I discovered you were one of the women he was cheating with." Why would you still want to marry him if you knew all this?" she whispered, still clutching the folder. "Because I believed people could change. I believed in second chances." I met her eyes steadily. "But mostly, I believed I didn't deserve better, that this was as good as it would get for me. That's what growing up as your sister taught me." Michelle sank into a chair, the voluminous white dress pooling around her. "Does anyone else know about this?" "Just the private investigator. And now you." We sat in silence for a long moment, the muffled sounds of the gathering celebration filtering through the closed door. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. I smiled, a real smile this time. "I'm going to walk out of here and start a new life, one where I'm not defined by you or by any man. I've already accepted a job offer in San Diego. I leave tomorrow." I stood up, smoothing down my maid of honor dress. "The question is, what are you going to do?" The photographer knocked on the door, announcing it was time for pre-ceremony pictures. Michelle stared at the folder in her hands, then at me, her expression shifting from shock to anger to something like grudging respect. "You knew all this time? You let me take your fiancé, your wedding, everything, knowing he was garbage?" I shrugged. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone else take out your trash. She laughed then, a short, bitter sound. "All these years, I thought I was winning. I thought I was better than you." "You weren't winning, Michelle. You were just taking. There's a difference." The photographer knocked again, more insistently. Michelle stood up, her decision evident in the set of her shoulders. "Tell them the bride needs 5 more minutes." After the photographer left, she turned to me. "I need to know one thing. If you knew about Ryan's cheating for months, why didn't you warn me when I started seeing him? Why let it get this far?" The question hung between us, laden with all our complicated history. "Part of me wanted to see how far you'd go," I admitted. "Whether there was any line you wouldn't cross. And part of me thought, maybe you deserved each other." She nodded slowly. "That's fair." She picked up her bouquet, my bouquet, and headed for the door. I need to have a conversation with my groom. What happened next became family legend, though the versions vary depending on who's telling it. Michelle, still in her wedding dress, marched down the aisle not to take her vows but to publicly expose Ryan's infidelities, throwing the folder of evidence at his feet. Some say she slapped him, others claim she simply delivered a scathing speech about betrayal and walked away with her head held high. My parents were mortified, of course. The guests were scandalized. Ryan's family was in disbelief, until one of the other women he'd been seeing, his colleague's wife, stood up to confirm the accusations. I wasn't there to witness any of it. I had already slipped away, leaving behind the ruins of a life that had never really been mine. That was 18 months ago. Since then, I've built a new life in San Diego. My event planning business is thriving, specializing in corporate retreats rather than weddings. I've made new friends who know me only as Kate, not as Michelle's sister. I've even started dating again, slowly and cautiously, a kind marine biologist who values honesty above all else. Michelle eventually moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting more seriously. We talk occasionally, stilted, careful conversations that acknowledge we can never go back to who we were before, but might someday find a way to move forward. She's in therapy, she tells me, working through her compulsive need to compete, to be the center of attention. Ryan tried to contact me several times, claiming Michelle had tricked him, that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd always loved me. I never responded. Some betrayals can't be undone. Why parents still don't understand why I moved away, why I abandoned the family during what my mother calls a difficult time. They've never apologized for their role in enabling Michelle's behavior our entire lives or for so quickly accepting the transfer of my fiancé from one daughter to another. I doubt they ever will. People often ask if I regret not exposing Ryan myself, not standing up and objecting at the wedding, not creating a scene to match the injury. They wonder if letting Michelle have her moment of righteous fury was another instance of me stepping aside, letting her take center stage, but they're missing the point. That day, for the first time in my life, I chose myself. I walked away from the drama, the competition, the toxic patterns that had defined my family for decades. I refused to play the game anymore, not because I couldn't win, but because I finally understood it wasn't worth playing. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in confrontation but in liberation. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you say, but what you refuse to say. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply walk away and build something new from the ashes of what was taken from you, and sometimes, just sometimes, you discover that what you thought was stolen from you was actually setting you free. The end. If you liked the story, Subscribe to our channel and share your impressions in the comments. We try to post new stories every day.